Everybody, how are you doing? And thank you, John, for opening this up. We're 16 months into doing everything remotely, and yet still, I promise you, over the next couple hours, there will be somebody who we hear the dog barking or other stuff in the background that we don't want to hear. But we really think it's important to have as much interaction and dialogue with you guys as possible. So with that, we opened it up so that we can, if you have any questions, you can take yourself off of mute and ask them to me or to Philip or to any of the other speakers. Or there's always the option to put a question in the chat. In order to put a question in the chat so that we can see it, so that I can see it, we need you to select everyone, not just all attendees, because we don't count, Philip and I don't count as attendees. You need to select everyone at the bottom of the list, and then we'll be able to see your chat. So with that, we wanted to say good afternoon. Thank you. Today, we are continuing to talk about finances, and we are hoping to answer any questions that you all may have had on the first two webinars on finances. So we've had a couple kind of really deep, in-depth conversations about all things, everything, MTW and financing. And what we hope to do today is just to give a quick reminder, a snapshot as to what we've talked about already, and really to hear from you. So we want to see if there's any specific questions on finances that you would like some more detailed information on, or if you want to get some clarification, or if there's any other questions that you may have. And I'd also like to welcome back to the agencies that are in the initial cohort. We haven't spoken with you in a couple of months, but we thought you might want to come back and join us for another office hours on the finances. So now that you've gotten your feet wet a little bit with MTW, we thought you might have some additional questions. So we welcomed you back to this office hours on finances. So the real main audience today is both the Cohort 1 and Cohort 2 agencies. So really excited for that. So kind of how today is going to go is once I turn it over to Philip, he's going to give you a kind of a quick reminder, a quick snapshot on all of the various finance topics that we've went over and that you should be familiar with through reading the MTW operations notice and by reviewing the online manual that's on HUD Exchange and all the various other training that's on HUD Exchange. And then we'll see if you have any questions on that specific topic and then move on to the next one. We also have Philip is here, Jean Reed, who you heard from last time, Praveen Krishnan are all here to answer questions. Unfortunately, our partners in the Capital Fund office and Peter Beyer were not able to join us today due to other commitments. So those of us here will do our best to answer any questions that you have. So that's really kind of the first part of the day. We're just going to go over things, hear your questions, hopefully answer any questions you might have. Then we'll have a little break, and then we will come back for Jeopardy. We're trying something new. We're testing your knowledge. So after the break, we will have questions for you guys, and we will have 10 questions. It'll be interactive with your smartphone, so we think that'll be a lot of fun. And then after that, we'll take any questions about anything else that you may have as it relates to MTW and the expansion. So that is how today is going to flow. As a reminder, if you want to say something, you can take yourself off of mute, or you can type a question in the chat to everyone, and then I'll read the question and we'll get the right person to answer it. And with that, I am going to, oh, next slide, please. Sorry, Laura, I never said that. Here's the agenda. Here's everything I just talked about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Philip to kind of walk us through the topic. So Philip, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today for our hopefully fun and interactive office hour session. But before we get to that fun and interactive gaming component, we would like to take a little bit of time to review some major topics that we went over during the first two parts of this webinar. So for Cohort 1, that would have been the finance webinar, the one-parter, and for our Cohort 2 agencies, the last two sessions. So as you can see here, these are the major buckets. And one of the things that I want to reiterate that Marianne had mentioned, this is not meant to rehash and re-go into depth over all of the topics related to MTW finances. This is sort of an overview and review of the major highlights. And so just to recall, if you want to, go back and review the information more in depth, the webinars will be posted on the HUD Exchange for you to review. So as you can see here, these are the topics. So next slide, please. So just one of the big points here to remind you is now you guys are MTW PHAs and you guys are either have already executed your MTW ACC amendments, possibly if you're a Cohort 1 agency, and for our Cohort 2 companions, you guys are getting ready to go through the process of executing your MTW ACC amendment and being able to use funding flexibility. This is one of those exciting topics where you guys get to be creative and really be innovative and think about the needs that you have in your community. And so there's just a few reminders here. The big thing I want to emphasize here is that for any activities that require waivers, you cannot begin those until after you have submitted your MTW supplement to the PHA plan and that has been approved. So you guys will be hearing, for our Cohort 2 PHAs, you guys will be hearing in depth in just a couple of weeks about the MTW supplement process, about how to navigate the online session and the process of submitting that. So stay tuned for that. More information about that will be forthcoming beginning on July 14th. Last point here is just to remember that the funding fungibility is really focused on Section 8 and Section 9 funding sources. So the HCV, Housing Choice Voucher, Capital Fund, and Operating Fund, and it does not apply to special purpose vouchers such as HUD-BASH, FUP, NED, the new EHV, Emergency Housing Vouchers Program. So I want to take a second here to check. Marianne, do we have any questions submitted through the chat so far?
I don't see any questions for the chat. So are there any questions on when you can implement your MTW funding flexibility? Again, you can take yourself off mute or you can type it into everyone. It needs to be everyone so that Philip and I can see that. Any questions on this?
Okay. So
not
hearing any. I said, okay, so not hearing any questions so far. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this chart is a really great reference, and you guys can take a look at this in the slide deck that has been posted on the HUD Exchange. You'll be able to see these slides in depth, but this is just a reminder about how the different funding sources, Operating Fund, Capital Fund, and the HCV program, how they are calculated. So just big takeaway point here is for Capital Fund and Operating Fund, there are absolutely no differences between non-MTW and MTW agencies and how those funds are calculated. So that's a big takeaway. And just to remind you, if you want to recall how the HCV program calculations are done, we have covered that in previous webinars, and there's also a lot of information on the online HUD Exchange manual. You'll be able to find out a lot of information just to remind yourself about how to calculate that. So just that's a big takeaway. And so at this point in time, do we have any questions from the audience on this topic? You can either unmute yourself or you can type questions in the chat box. Make sure you select everyone if you were doing the chat option.
So we do have a question in the chat box, and I believe this question is either for Jean Reed or for Praveen Krishnan. If one of you could take this one. The question from Christine is, if you have to enter NED and FUP in VMS as MTW, then does that administrative funding for those vouchers get included with all other MTW vouchers? Praveen or Jane, can one of you tackle that one?
Yeah, I can answer that one. No, they would get their same, they would get a separate admin fees for those that are leased in VMS under the MTW. So it would get added in together, you know, like if you have your NADS and your FUP, those would be, you know, how many you have leased would also be included. So it's together as one, but it gets counted separately in the breakout when they'll see their admin fee reconciliation might be a little different than what they're seeing now. I'm not quite sure. So they'll be able to see the breakout.
Okay. Great.
That helps.
Thanks, Jean and Christine. We hope that answered your question on that. Are there any other questions on how funding will be calculated? Okay, Philip, I don't see any other questions. Take it away.
Okay, great. So actually, can we advance to the next slide, please? Okay, so you guys, you know, both for our Cohort 1 and Cohort 2 PHAs may remember we had some exciting outside speakers from San Bernardino and or Lawrence Douglas County to talk about how they have tackled, once they become an Mtw PHA, thinking about things like policies and procedures and how they sort of, you know, adopted with the new Mtw status. So I highly encourage you guys to go back and review that in the webinars that will be posted, that are posted on the HUD Exchange. So the big thing just to take into account here is that the Mtw, you know, status does not apply to 2 CFR Part 200 requirements, as well as environmental review and fair housing and things like that. So you will just need to recall, as you are starting to become an Mtw PHA, that 2 CFR Part 200 requirements, so things like the single audit requirement, indirect cost rate, cost allocation, and things of that nature are still applicable for Mtw PHA. So that's just a big point to take away here. So just a big thing to remember that those requirements still apply. And so now, Marion, have we got any new questions in the chat? Or as we've already said, you may also ask a question verbally by pressing the unmute button at the bottom of the screen.
Yes, so we do have another question, and again, asking you guys if you have any questions in the chat to type it in under everyone so that I can see it, and many thanks to somebody, Christy, for reposting a question. So the question is for Jean, I believe, possibly Praveen. The funding for special purpose vouchers are consolidated in the HCV funding. Since SPV funding is not separate, how do you even know whether SPV funds are used fungibly?
Excellent question. Now, Praveen might have to help me on this one because their funding is done differently than the legacies MTWs. I would assume after the first full year, or maybe possibly the following year, when we start reconciling all the funds. So I understand where they're coming from. They will be fungible later down the road after the reconciliation is completed, because then it's not broken out anymore. All your funds are combined. So basically what we're saying is that the first year when you get new funding, like if you get new FUP or VASH or even NEDS, those funds are strictly for those purposes. After the full year, after it's reconciled, unless you are keeping track of it separately, you'll be able to tell the difference of, you know, how much money you have in this particular program. But afterwards, that's where it gets a little messy. And I think that's where we keep running into some issues a little bit, Marianne. I'm not quite sure.
Yep. I think Praveen can speak to this. Praveen, since the funding isn't separate, how do you know whether the funds are used fungibly?
I think, can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yep,
Yep.
we can hear you. Thanks.
I think, you know, it comes down to how it's being reported. You track initially your initial funding stream of, say, VASH that you receive. That funding is not meant to be used fungibly. So even though in future years it may be consolidated, Gene, I think this makes sense. I think an agency will still have to track by dollar amount how much of that consolidated amount would be what portion of that would be a special purpose voucher, and if they are spending that from the consolidated amount on VASH, you would report that as such, right? I think
you're still going to show.
So Praveen,
Yeah.
Praveen, am I hearing you say that the agency should track locally which funds are being, and be able to track which funds are being used for which purposes?
yes, on the SPV side. I mean, we can also
The special purpose vouchers?
Yeah, I mean, we can provide like a full answer talking to the FMD folks too on this, but the special purpose vouchers are not to be meant to, you can't use those fungibly. So
No, you're right, you can't, but what they're saying is, okay, but if they need to show all their expenses as much as in VMS as possible, because they're funding. Now, Marianne, I'm not 100% sure because their funding might be differently than.
I saw you completed that memo for.
They should get their funding based on their VMS expenses. So if they're not using all their nets, like the original award letter, those funds are going to be sitting in HUD held. The following year,
Right.
say they're using more money, they're going to be showing those expenses in. Those expenses should be based on their funding for the following year, what their expenses are based on in VMS. So they're going to still, like if they get, so much money the first year and they don't spend it all, that money is going to sit in HUD held. The following year is going to be, their funding is going to be based on the renewal of their VMS expenses. The following year,
Right.
their expenses could be higher, so then they'll get additional funding the following year. It's always going to be based on their VMS expenses. So their HUD held after that first year will all be combined, and they'll be able to keep it tracked separately themselves. But for funding purposes, it's all combined.
Yeah.
that's right.
That
For
makes
funding renewal
sense.
purposes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Perfect. Great. Hopefully that answered the question. We do have another question in here from Ashley that it also looks like will be coming into us in writing. So thank you for that. Praveen, I'm going to send this one back over to you. So the question is, and I believe if I'm reading the question right, it's relating to how HAP funding is calculated. Given the, sorry, I need to scroll wrong. Given the rent freezes that have been in place this year and the housing choice voucher payments have lagged, what considerations will HUD make for artificially low contract rents that will go up later this year and next year? We are afraid that we will get locked into lower funding levels that will reduce the number of people we can serve. We're also submitting a letter. Praveen, can you?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm not clear on if this is just a general question on funding levels or MTW. I can say for new MTW agencies, you're not locked into funding levels. Just as a backdrop, the initial agencies had a different setup where it was kind of frozen every year, and you were, in a sense, locked into funding levels. For the new agencies, it's strictly based on your expenses, whether it's HAP or eligible non-HAP MTW expenses, and that includes what you might be spending from your reserves. So you're not necessarily locked in. And one thing with MTW with contract rents, for example, on the RAD side, one benefit of MTW is your ability to augment rent with your fungibility. you can use your fungibility to help increase when you're setting rents on the RAD side. So hopefully I'm answering your question. I don't totally get the locking into lower funding levels. That might be related to how the initial 39 agencies are funded, but for the new agencies such as yours, no funding is locked. It's every year based on how much you spend, whether on HAP or eligible non-HAP.
Perfect. Thank you, Praveen. Ashley, we hope that answers your question. Are there any other, and thanks, Laura, for pulling up this slide. So any other questions on this funding calculations, or if you can go to the next slide, Laura, on this very important slide and this explanation point that Part 200 requirements still apply. Okay, thank you. Great questions. And so with that, next slide, and Philip, back to you, Philip.
I need to unmute myself first. Okay, thank you very much for all of these great questions. I'm glad you guys have had your thinking caps on and are asking really great and really great questions. So thank you for that. So this slide here really we just want to speak really quickly to all of the different financial reporting systems that you guys have. And so we will go through some major points on these systems, and this just sort of represents the systems that we'll be kind of talking about today. Next slide. So this is just a big point on VMS reporting. So after your MTW executed, become an MTW agency the first of the month after HUD and the PHA have both executed that ACC amendment. So this is just an example based on a PHA executed, having their and then how this affects their VMS reporting. So essentially, in August, you would not use the MTW field because you would not become an MTW PHA until August 1st of 2021. And so in August, you would do your VMS reporting as a non-MTW PHA for August of 2021 because it's always a month behind. And then in September, this is the first month where you would use VMS, the MTW specific reporting field. So this is just a big a reminder around VMS reporting. And just as a little sort of sneak peek, we will be sending out an MTW Insider newsletter with some additional VMS reporting information here really shortly. So just as a little preview of upcoming attractions. So at this point, do we have any oral questions on the call? So you just recall, you just unmute yourself to ask your questions, or Marianne, do we have any new questions in the chat on these topics that we have talked about so far?
So I do not see any new questions. I did see a note from Ashley that he will continue to follow up about the expenses. And I think in seeing that, I think that the question is more for all agencies, not just MTW agencies. So Ashley, we look forward to receiving your question, and we'll circle with the voucher office to respond. Any questions about the timing of reporting into VMS? So here's a question from Lindsay. And I am going to ask Philip to answer this question, Philip or Jean. If we choose not to use our funding flexibly until 2022, but we signed our ACC amendment this summer, do we have to report in the MTW fields in VMS?
So great question, Lindsay, and the answer is yes. So this is one of the systems where funding flexibility and whether you choose to start it immediately after becoming a PHA is not germane. So basically, in your example, let's just hypothetically say that you submit your ACC amendment to HUD August 1st, okay, and HUD countersigns it on August 16th. Your first day as an MTW PHA will be September 1 of 2021. So in September, when you do your VMS reporting, you will be doing your August 2021 expenses, and you will use the regular non-MTW PHA field. But then come October 1, when you're doing your September reporting, then you will need to begin using the MTW-specific reporting fields in VMS. I hope that answers your question. Great, glad to hear it. And just again, as a reminder, if we have any questions, if you want to ask your question by telephone, just make sure you press the unmute button and then you can ask your question and we will make sure that we get it answered. So I'm not hearing any more questions. So ICF, I think we can advance to the next slide, please. So just as a big point here, this is kind of talking about the two options that are available to you as it pertains to FDS reporting. So this is one of those systems where it is dependent on a decision that you make during the ACC amendment execution process. So if you are in the current, so let's just say you have executed your ACC amendment and your fiscal year end is going to be, let's just say September 30th for hypothetical purposes, and you have executed your ACC amendment prior to that, and you want to use funding flexibility. If you choose to use funding flexibility prior to the end of your current operating year, you will need to use the MTW-specific FDS reporting instructions. However, if you choose to wait until after the end of your current operating year, let's just say you decide to wait until October 1 to start using funding flexibility, then you can use the normal FDS reporting instructions that you have been using. Just an important clarifying point, though, is after the end of that current operating year, then you will need to begin to use MTW reporting instructions in FDS, regardless of whether or not you choose to implement funding flexibility. So that's just a big point, important point on the topic. So with that, I think we can pause and we'll have another opportunity to ask questions on this topic or any other topics that we have asked so far. Marianne, do we have any new questions?
We do. Thank you. This question is from Kim, and the question is, this sounds like it's a question that's unique to the specific agency, but I'm going to read it and provide the answer in case this also impacts other agencies. The question here is, we are having problems submitting our information into the MTW fields of VMS. Our ACC amendment was signed in March. So we started submitting our April finances in the MTW fields of VMS. I'm assuming it's what that means. We were told that we have not yet been changed to an MTW agency. Are you aware of this problem? So Kim, this is a good question. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to start with the reminder on the ACC amendment that the process is that agency signs the ACC amendment, sends the signed ACC amendment to MTW Cohort 1 or MTW Cohort 2 at HUD.gov. Jennifer or we at HUD, Jenny or Tanisha, will batch those amendments and we'll send them forward for our General Deputy Assistant Secretary's signature. It's not until we get the General Deputy Assistant Secretary's signature on the ACC amendment that you are considered actually designated as an MTW agency. So it's hopefully March, we've already sent it and that's not the issue here, but just this is a good time to remind you that just because the agency, the PHA, has signed the ACC amendment that does not mean that you're MTW. You have to wait until HUD, the General Deputy Assistant Secretary or Assistant Secretary, when we get one, counts her signs and executes the ACC amendment. At that point, that is the day that you are MTW, and it's starting that next month that you start reporting into VMS. So that's one. The second question here is, we're told that we're not yet changed to an MTW agency. I'm not familiar with this problem, but I do ask, it sounds like it could be a Cohort 1 agency. So I do ask if you could send a note to MTW Cohort 1 mailbox, and we will try to work with you. I think what I'm might be understanding here is you have been designated, you do have the executed MTW ACC amendment, possibly you've been told to start entering it into VMS and you're still having issues. If that's the case, I would actually encourage you to work with your financial analyst, Jean, I think is that your title, and your field office to try to make sure that you can accurately report into VMS. Jean, do you have any other suggestions for this this PHA that's having a hard time?
Right. What's happening is they're just getting error messages, and it's not on their fault. It's something with the VMS system itself. It's not recognizing them coming on as MTW. There's a transition there. So just keep going in and putting your stuff in where we're telling you to do it as an MTW. You're going to get the error messages, but it's nothing that you are doing wrong. It's on our end, and just there's a drop down box and you could say we're an MTW agency, or you know, whatever the error is, and if it's correct, you can just put a little comment there, and then you're going to be sending them to Samantha. I believe she's been in contact with most of the PHAs, so just keep submitting like you are, and you guys should be, it'll work out eventually.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say, Jean, is that once you're in VMS, there is a drop down to specify that, yep, I'm now MTW. You might still get error fields. Continue to submit your information, and then you can always be in touch with Jean or Samantha, it sounds like in Jean's office. And I would definitely make sure that your local field office, and you can always copy the MTW Cohort 1 mailbox just for awareness if you think that would be helpful. But between Jean and Samantha and your local field office, you should hopefully be able to get that information accurately reported into VMS.
Right. Just
Jean, is that right?
Right. Just keep reporting it, you know, where we're telling you to report them. You get those error messages, use the drop down box, and we'll get it approved. It's just I think there's something wrong with our system, that it's not getting it fast enough for these ones to come on when, you know, they're coming on so many different times. It's, you know, they have to go in and redo the whole system over to add them on. So, yeah.
All right. And so for an agency that's not able, so now we're in June, so we're talking about April. So those agencies still going to be able to, the April funds are still going to be recognized.
Correct.
Right,
yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say if you do have, it sounds like there's a little bit of a hiccup on the system side and getting the VMS to recognize all of these new agencies coming on. Stay on top of it, be in close contact with Jean and Samantha and your local field office, and feel free to loop in MTW Cohort 1 if necessary, but I have full, you know, I know that Jean and her team will be able to make sure that it's all kind of accepted into VMS.
Yep.
So thank you for that question. So we do have another question here. This is for Philip. I'm going to ask you to answer this next question, and it relates to Fds reporting for agencies with no voucher. The question here is, I'm sorry, agencies with no public housing, not voucher. My brain just flipped it. Our public housing inventory was converted to RAD. We no longer have any public housing or CSP program. We currently only have an HCV program. So fungibility really does not apply to us. Is that correct? Does the MTW FDS reporting apply to us? Philip, can I take the first step part of that question and then ask you to answer the FDS reporting part of the question? So this is a question that comes up a lot. Are voucher-only agencies using fungibility? And the answer is yes, because you can use your HCV admin fees and your HAP funding interchangeably for eligible purposes for the other. So in that sense, you are still applying MTW fungibility between your HCV admin fee and your HCV HAP. So in that case, you are technically still applying MTW fungibility. I'm going to ask Philip, could you answer the question, does MTW FDS reporting apply to us?
And yes, and for similar reasons, the MTW FDS reporting still does apply to you for the reason that Marianne just mentioned, because you are able to use your HAP and your HAP admin fee expenses flexibly. So for example, in support of local non-traditional, once your ACC, your supplement has been approved. So for that reason, the answer is yes.
Great questions. Great questions. Thanks, everybody. Are there any other questions at this point, either verbally or in the chat?
Marianne, it does look like there is a question right above the question that was just asked about funding flexibility. And it is there a deadline for a PHA to be converted to an MTW, i.e. deadline to execute the MTW ACC amendment?
Thank you, Philip. And I missed that, so thank you. Glad there's two of us here. And the answer is no, a soft no, though you will start to get a lot of emails and encouragements from both the MTW office and your local field office trying to encourage you to get that ACC amendment signed and executed. HUD does have a statutory timeline in which we are required to designate all agencies by a certain date. That said, you are MTW, as part of your MTW status is to be able to participate in a study, a cohort study, and start using your MTW flexibility so we can, for the cohort 1 agencies, so we can compare your MTW flexibility, your flexibilities with those that don't have them. So we haven't put a deadline on when the ACCs need to be assigned yet. That's not to say we won't at some point going forward if it goes too long. So I ask that if you haven't, especially this cohort 1 agencies, if you have not yet signed your ACC amendment, please be in touch with both the MTW cohort 1 mailbox and your field office and let us know why and when you expect to sign it. Okay, and with that,
Marianne, before you get to any the next question, I wanted to follow up on the fungibility question on the public housing inventory converting to RAD. So one thing to note, because the funds can be used interchangeably, so if you don't have a public housing inventory anymore, if there are any remaining Section 9 funds, those can be used to support something like a RAD PBV project post-conversion. I'm not sure if that's the case for you all, but I just wanted to clarify, after your public housing inventory is no longer there, if you still have remaining public housing funds, it can be used post-conversion to support a RAD project.
Thanks so much, Praveen. That's an important clarification, so thank you for that. There is another question in here. I think this question is for Philip, possibly Praveen. The question here from David is, we are a housing choice voucher only program with all current units transitioning to MTW vouchers. If we do not utilize any of the current reserves by our fiscal year end, I assume we would only need to report on FDS under the voucher program, correct?
So just to, it seems to be like there's a couple of different things going on with this question. So really the FDS reporting instructions, if you're in the middle of your current operating year, it hinges on whether or not you choose to implement funding flexibility. So for example, if you choose to use your funds flexibly, then you would need to follow the MTW reporting instructions in that current year. However, if you choose not to, you try to have everything steady state, then you would just follow your normal FDS reporting instructions for your current operating year as you would be. And yes, and to the second part of your question, in the second year, if you choose not to implement funding flexibility, the next year you would need to start using the MTW specific reporting instructions in VMS. So regardless, after the current operating year concludes and you begin your next operating year, then the MTW reporting instructions kick in.
Awesome. And we got it. So thanks, Philip. That was a very clear answer, and that answered his question. So great.
Great.
And with that, I think we can go to the next slide, Laura. Philip?
Okay, great. So we are getting some really great questions, and I encourage you to just continue asking your burning MTW finance questions. That's why we are doing this session with cohorts 1 and cohorts 2 together, to allow you guys to have that additional opportunity. So I continue to definitely encourage you to do that. So this question here, this slide is really just talking about the new emergency housing voucher program. So Congress allocated $5 billion in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to fund approximately 70,000 new special purpose vouchers called emergency housing vouchers. And just as a reminder, these vouchers are meant to help families experiencing homeless, domestic violence, or who are recently homeless. And to just to remind everyone, more information about that program, and including reporting requirements and things of that nature, you can go to this link here on the slide and access PIH Notice 2021-15, which is the Emergency Housing Vouchers Operating Requirements PIH Notice. So just an encouragement to you all to definitely take a look at that. And so now at this time, do we have any additional questions that have come in, that have come in the chat, or are there any callers on the line who would like to ask a question?
Yep, we do have a couple questions, so I'm going to kind of take them as they're coming in. And so this first one, Praveen, I'm going to ask you to address this one. And I think, and I think this is kind of going across all the programs, so it's not specified in the question. So Jill asks, if funding flexibility is implemented and budget is based on expenses, so that's, again, that's talking about HAP, HCV HAP funding is based on expenses. In theory, is an MTW's budget increasing annually, assuming expenses are increasing annually? Under what circumstances would budgets be reduced?
Okay.
For me, there's a lot there to that question.
There are a couple things there. So one thing to reiterate, so if we break it down by each funding stream, so your operating fund and capital fund is going to be renewed the same as it is if you're non-MTW. Also for your admin fee on the voucher side. The only difference is on the HAP side, and that, though, we've really tried to mirror, regardless of funding flexibility, we really tried to mirror the renewal similar to how non-MTWs are renewed. So it's going to be based on expenses. And if you know, in terms of the budget increasing annually, in theory, yes, but if you don't spend, say on the HAP side, if you're not spending on anything and you're keeping something in reserves, that will not count towards your eligibility and will only count once you've actually expended that money. And another thing to clarify on fungibility, you could say you want to use your operating or capital fund to support your voucher program. That you can do, but that's not going to count towards your renewal. So that's not going to like blow up the budget. You're only, on the HAP side, you're only going to be renewed based on eligible HAP expenses and non-MTW expenses. So you could use your HAP to support public housing, but if you do vice versa, you can do that, but that's not going to increase your budget. So in terms of circumstances where your budget could be reduced would be just, you know, if you're not expending money, that will only be counted towards renewal once you spend it. And I'm just talking about the voucher side because on the public housing side, your renewal is not changing. The way it's being calculated is going to be the same. I hope I answered your question.
Great, thank you. And there was another question similar. So I'm going to just make a plug for all of you to read the operations notice. If you go to the pretty version of the operations notice, section 6 of the overall Federal Register, we've organized it in a reader-friendly format. Everything that we're talking, most of what we're talking about here is in there, and the notice provides with examples how the Housing Choice Voucher HAP funding will be calculated. That's on section 5B on page 14 of the operations notice. So definitely encourage all of you to read that and to become familiar with the operations notice in general and this section in particular. Also, our ICF team has put together a really good online training manual where they've really broken out the voucher and the funding calculation piece and answering a lot of those questions as well. So I just encourage all of you to read that as well. And then continue bringing your questions after you've read them again and reviewed this again. If you still have questions, we're happy to answer them. So hopefully that answered that. Hopefully that also answered the question about going over the HAP renewal, public housing, and how it's all going to be calculated. Yeah, and so just the clarification, Praveen. So we keep on saying re-benchmarking. HUD refers to it as re-benchmarking. We're assuming that it would work the same way as the regular vouchers relative to the HAP funding, correct?
Yeah, that's the official term. That's right, re-benchmarking. Right. That's going to be based on your expenses, your HAP expenses. The only difference now that your MTW is your eligible sources of HAP funding, your HAP money that you might be using for a non-HAP purpose, an eligible non-HAP purpose. That's also part of your re-benchmarking. That's really the main difference.
Right. And then this next one from Shirley is a two-parter. I'm going to send the second part over to Jean and then the first part over to Philip. The question is, under MTW, can I request that excess HUD-held reserves are used for development, and how can I do that? Jean?
Okay, you can ask for that if you are under the fungibility, the flexibility funding already, and you would just show those expenses in VMS under the development cost. And you would just have to ask for funds like you did before when you needed additional money, and just provide any documentation that this development that you want to pay for is in your plan, and that the MTW office has approved this in your I'm trying to think of the word I'm trying to
supplement. Yeah, the field office would have approved it in the supplement. Yep.
Right, and then we'll be able to provide you the additional funds as long as the funds are available.
Yeah. And then the second part of that, Philip, if you can talk to how am I able to use those, you know, prior year reserves for MTW purposes?
Yes. So that is actually one of my upcoming slides. So I will go ahead and answer the question. But yes, so currently right now, your previously appropriated Section 8 and Section 9 funds, so that's operating fund, capital fund, and HCV, HAP, and HCV admin fees, those can be used with funding flexibility. Currently, Congress has provided us that ability through September 30th of 2021, and that ability is renewed annually throughout the annual Appropriations Act process. There is a general provision that's included to provide that relief temporarily. So we have a web page, which you will see the link right here. You can go to that web page and you will always be able to see the most up-to-date status of that ability. So right now it'll basically say the 2021 Appropriations Act has provided this ability through September 30th. And so after September 30th, we will then re-update it based on the budget situation at that time. So just stay tuned, and you guys are encouraged to bookmark that page and check in on that after September 30th of this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Philip. And there's another question in here. Our capital fund friends are not on the line. I'm going to see if Philip or Praveen, if one of you can take this. Are DDTF funds treated the same as capital funds for MTW purposes?
I am not sure the answer to that question. Praveen,
Okay.
Do you know? If not, we can circle back with you via the Cohort 1 or Cohort 2 mailbox.
Yeah, we should probably circle back. I'd have to check. I do recall that that might be explained in the operations notice, specifically on DDTF. But yeah, we'd have to check with the capital fund folks.
Okay, great. So yeah.
Oh,
so,
look at this. A quick, and looking at the operations notice now, if you type in DDTF, are included in the regular formula grants. And so it does look, if you look on page 12 of the operations notice, it answers this question right there. It looks like they are part of the capital fund, and we can send out a better clarifying answer through the insider tips that'll come out later. But again, the operations notice is on our website. It's searchable. If you type in DDTF, you can get the answer. So thanks for letting me plug the ops notice again. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys. Now wait, if you can go, I believe, to the previous slide, back to the emergency housing voucher reporting. Philip?
Okay, and so just in the interest of time, I'm going to cover the next two slides so that you guys can get your break. So, so the emergency housing voucher program, so we had just talked about the new special purpose voucher program addressing homelessness. This is just a reminder that funding fungibility does not apply to this grant program. These funds were appropriated in a Supplemental Appropriations Act, and so you must use these funds for the appropriated purpose. And so specifically, these vouchers need to be used to address the needs of homeless families, those fleeing domestic violence, and those who are recently homeless. So, and just a reminder, we will be updating VMS to collect that data. And so if you have more questions about this particular topic, make sure you read that PIH Notice 2021-15 because it goes into a lot of depth about this new program and the requirements. Next slide. So this is just really quickly something I just stated and as a response to an answer, but to a question, but essentially just recall that for your previously appropriated funds, per the FY 2021 Congressional Appropriations Act, Op Fund, HCV, that includes both admin fee and HAP, can be used with funding flexibility. So as I said, this is something that is on a temporary basis in one of our general provisions, and it is being renewed so far. And it is very important that you guys bookmark this page because you guys are responsible for keeping up to date on the status of this. So I highly encourage you after this call to take this link down and make sure you bookmark it so that you can come back here after September 30th of this year to see what the updated status is. So I think that right before we have a break, do we have any more questions that have come in through the chat before we go on our break?
Let me see. I don't see any questions in the chat. Just to let you guys know that URL for the previously appropriated funds is also found in the operations notice. So you can find for it there as well. Oh, this is a great question. Will the CARES, there's a question. I don't know who this is for. Then we might, will the CARES Act HAP expensed in fiscal year 21 be included in the calendar, in the calendar year 21 be included in the calendar year 22 renewal calculation? We might need to talk to our friends in the voucher office on that one and get back to you, unless it's Philip or Praveen or Jean.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because there wasn't.
This looks like one that yeah. Let us consult with our friends in the voucher office, and we will get back to you on that. Great question, and we don't want to give the wrong. Yep. Praveen, is that you?
I will say, yeah, we can check. I mean, whatever is decided, I think they need, I think we'd have to check the CARES Act notice, because whatever is decided on future funding for CARES Act HAP, that would not just be for MTW. That's kind of a
correct
PIH-wide decision, right? I think that's kind of an outside MTW question, but yeah, we can get an answer to that.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so now we are going to move into a 10-minute break to let all of that absorb into your head. It is now 3:04. We'll see Eastern. We'll see you back here at 3:14 Eastern. When we come back, we're playing a game, something like Jeopardy. Bring your cell phone or your iPad or something that you'll be able to play the game on, preferably a different thing than you're watching this on. And we look forward to trying out something new with you guys after the break. So go grab some water, get some fresh air, and we'll see you back here at 3:14 Eastern. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your break. All right. Now we are going to play a quiz show to help test your knowledge on MTW finances. Laura, I guess next slide, this is Jeopardy! I will admit to having watched a few episodes of Jeopardy last night in preparation for today, so we shall see how this goes. For this part of the conversation, we will want to use your smartphones or iPads or any other smart device, preferably something that is different from the computer monitor that you're using for this. So if you can take advantage of the opportunity to answer a bunch of questions and compete with your fellow colleagues and agencies to win the top spot. So please, first thing, grab your phone, your iPad, any device that lets you open up a URL and open a browser. Open Safari, Chrome, Google, whatever that works, and go to menti.com. That's www.menti.com. I'm going to give folks a minute to do that. Get your phones, get your iPads. I promise this will be fun. You'll let us know if it is or is it not. Go to a URL, go to a new page, type in www.menti.com, and then when you get to the code part, you type in the code. The code is here written on the screen. It's 3193927. I don't think I said that right. 3193927. That didn't sound right in my own head. Look at the sheet, not my words. 31939727. So John, our host, is also entering this code into the WebEx chat box so you can see it as we move along. So I'll give you a minute. Grab your phones, grab your iPads, open up a new URL, type in www.menti.com, and then type in the code 3193927. All right, we good? All right, so the objective of the game, we've got 10 questions. I'm gonna put my phone down. You all know what smartphones look like, right? 10 questions. The goal is to answer all 10 questions correctly, yay, and quickly. That's the tough part. And as we go through the questions, we will, stop to see kind of where we are in the leaderboard periodically. The faster you are, the more points that you'll get. And then at the end, the winner will be revealed. So if you don't have a phone here, we expect most of you have a phone. If you don't have a phone, or if you're calling in on your phone and you're not able to play, that's okay. You can still play, follow along. Answer the questions to yourself. Don't type it into the chat box. You don't want to give away the answers, but maybe you can tell your coworker, tell your dog, tell your spouse what the answer is, shout it off into the rooftops. Just don't type it into the chat box because that would give it away for everybody else. Okay, you will be assigned a character or a little icon, a little ghost, a little squiggly, whatever it might be. You will enter in your name if you want to. See, here's all the cute little icons. We got koala bears. Oh, look, is this you guys? That's awesome. Way to go. I see lion. I see a confused face. I see all kinds of great stuff. I see a Blinken's hat. Enter your name if you're comfortable. If not, you can use whatever random squiggly wiggly name you want to use. And I'm going to just wait a minute while everybody joins. This is fun. If nothing else, how cute is that koala bear? And I see, is that a fox or a, oh my goodness, that's great. A ring, some watermelon. Who doesn't need that on a hot day like today? There's a bear. Yay, Santa Claus. So a penguin. That's what I got right here. If you don't see, penguins are the best. Love Antarctica. Is that a crab? Awesome. So again, go to menti.com, type in your name, type in the code, type in your name. I think I might be a bumblebee. These are great. These are awesome. 8-ball. My money's on that 8-ball. Okay. Shall we go forward? Let's go forward. So as we get started, we need to first have a practice question. And there's a reason for this that ISF has explained to me. I forget. They told me 3 times. I don't remember. I don't really care. All I know is we have to do it. So there's a very important question that I'm going to ask you guys, and you got to give us an answer. Ready? Use your phone. The practice question is, are you ready to play? Yes or no? Yes or no? Type in the correct answer. And the right answer is yes. Sweet. Oh my gosh. Oh. No. Yay, everybody's ready to play. Thank you for bearing with us today, you guys. Very much appreciated. So that's how this is going to work. I ask a question. It'll come up on the screen. I'll read it aloud. We'll go to the next slide, and you'll have the opportunity to type in the answer. So trying something new. Never been a game show hostess. We'll see how this goes. All right, next question. So I think we're ready to go. So here's question 1. Put that down. 2 CFR Part 200 requirements still apply for expansion MTW agencies, true or false? Again, the question is 2 CFR Part 200 requirements still apply for MTW expansion agencies, true or false? Type it into your phone. We've got 6 seconds left to type it in. 3, 2, 1. Yes. 48 yeses. I think I see a couple of no's. I'm going to convince you no's that the answer is yes. Yes, Part 200 requirements still apply. Yes, cash management still applies. Yes, spending fund, drawing down funds only when you have immediate need. All of that still applies to MTW agencies, to all MTW agencies. Okay. Next question. Question number 2. Can an MTW agency draw down capital funds in advance of immediate need? Yes or no? Can an MTW agency draw down capital funds in advance of immediate need? Yes or no? And as those of you who were listening closely to my rambling before, I think I may have given away this answer. We've got 5, 4, let's go. Time's up. All right. Glad we asked this question. The correct answer is no. MTW agencies cannot draw down their capital funds in advance of immediate need. So just like when you can pull down the capital funds for non-MTW agencies need to wait until they can expend them within the next 3 days. MTW agencies, it's the exact same thing. So can an MTW agency draw down funds in advance of immediate needs? The answer is no. So congratulations to the 36 of you that got that correct. All right, moving on. Next question number 3. How does HUD inform expansion agencies whether or not that year's appropriation bill allows them to use previously appropriated funds flexibly? Again, how does HUD inform agencies whether that year's appropriations bill allows them to use previously appropriated funds flexibly? Do we do that on the HUD exchange, on the MTW webpage, on the HUD website, or through an annual Federal Register notice? Again, how will we let you know whether the appropriations bill allows you to use those funds flexibly? HUD exchange, MTW webpage, or through a Federal Register notice? Okay. And the answer is, all right, another really good question. And the correct answer is B, as in boy, on our MTW webpage. Again, each year, we need to look at the appropriations bill will tell us whether or not MTW agencies can use prior funds flexibly. In 2021, Congress said, yep, MTW agencies can use their prior appropriated funds flexibly. 2022, they may or may not say that. So first, it is up to you to know what the bill says, and we will have that available to you on our webpage. And that was the webpage that Philip included on the slide earlier today. So we will let you know what the appropriations bill says through that link on our webpage. So don't be looking for a Federal Register notice. Don't go to HUD Exchange. Look at the HUD website, and we will tell you clearly what the appropriations bill says. Great question. Okay, so now hey Laura, can we check to see how we're doing? How's that leaderboard doing? So here you'll see kind of where you are on the leaderboard. Oh, I got to get on my glasses for this one. Wow, who is that little goldfish on top with the, there's a lot of really good, we've got a Puggy, we've got Janina, Justice, Cat, David, Jill, a unicorn, Wolfmeister, PH Accounting, and Puffy are the top, I guess, 10 in the lead. So for those of you that don't see your names on here, you can see where you fall in relation to the 50-some people that are playing the game on your phone. On your cell phone or your smartphone, you can see where you fall. So great job. Good job, all of you. And I think, Janina, I think you are in the lead. So that's who we're after. All right, get ready to go. Next question. Question number 4. Traditional capital fund, I'll wait till it's up. Traditional capital fund eligible activities should be drawn down using the line item associated with that activity. True or false? Traditional capital eligible activities should be drawn down using the line item associated with that activity. True or false? So do you need to use the regular capital fund BLIs for regular capital fund activities? True or false? Good job. All right, so the majority of you guys got that right, 41, so way to go. 41 of the ones that answered got that right. A few falses, but the answer is true. So if y'all are familiar with the regular, obviously you're familiar with it, you've been reporting forever, the regular BLIs for the capital fund activities, you need to use those traditional BLIs for any traditional capital fund activities. And then for any activity that you're using capital funds for that you are not using, that is not a capital activity. So if you wanted to use your capital funds on, say, an operating expense or a voucher expense, those are the funds that you put in 1492. But if it's a traditional capital activity, you put it in the traditional capital BLI. Good job. We're doing well. All right, number 5. Next question, please. Okay, question. Public housing operating funds are calculated differently for expansion agencies than they are for non-MTW agencies. True or false? Public housing operating funds are calculated differently for expansion agencies than for non-MTW agencies. True or false? Are op funds calculated differently for MTW than non? And time is up. Correct. Yes, the correct answer is false. So how funds are calculated for the operating fund, they're calculated exactly the same. And actually, the capital fund too, they're calculated exactly the same for MTW expansion agencies as they are for non-MTW agencies. So, so they're calculated exactly the same, no difference. Good job. Number 6. Next question. Grab some water. If an expansion agency chooses to use MTW funding flexibility during its current operating year, it must use the MTW-specific FDS reporting instructions. True or false? And we talked about this a little bit earlier today. If an expansion agency chooses to use MTW flexibility during the current operating year, it must use the MTW-specific FDS reporting instructions. True or false? Give you a moment to pull that one up. And the answer is good job. Even more got that one. The answer is yes. And I think we just talked about that today, and that shows that y'all were paying attention. So well done. All right. So next question, number 7, is future laws that conflict with any provision of the MTW-ACC amendment supersede the MTW ACC amendment. True or false? Future laws that conflict with any provision of the MTW ACC amendment supersede that MTW ACC amendment. True or false? Would any future laws supersede your ACC amendment? And the answer is true. Any future law that conflicts with any provision of the ACC amendment would supersede that ACC amendment. Future laws hold. So that answer is true. Yes, future laws will supersede the ACC amendment. All right. Hey, Laura, let's check to see how we're doing on that leaderboard. If Janina, I think her name was, is still on the top, how others are oh. All right. I love watching them go back and forth. It's like all up and down between. We got Puggy, like ran ahead to the lead. I don't know too many pugs, but I don't know them to be that fast. But you squeezing it out there, Puggy, and then Janina, David, Unicorn, Wolfmeister, BLM, Puffy, Boo, TV and Didi. You guys, these names are hilarious. Thank you for that. So way to go. Okay, so you can see where you are. And again, if you don't see your name on the leaderboard, check your smart device and you will see where you are in relation to everything else. Okay, last set, 3 more questions. All right, ready, Laura? Next question, number 8. Expansion agencies may apply funding fungibility to which of the following sources? Housing choice voucher, housing assistance payments, operating fund, HUD-VASH, or A and B, which is HAP and operating fund. Again, the question is, expansion agencies may apply funding fungibility to which of the following funding sources? Housing choice voucher, HAP, operating fund, HUD-VASH, or A and B, which is HAP and operating fund. And the answer is D. Oh my goodness, almost all of you got that correctly. That is correct. And so as a reminder, the funding fungibility does not apply to special purpose vouchers. So HUD-VASH is a special purpose voucher. It cannot apply funding fungibility to that. You can apply the funding fungibility to housing choice voucher, HAP and admin fees, and public housing operating fund and capital fund, which wasn't listed here. So that's kind of a trick question. So again, we can apply it to HAP, admin fee, operating, and capital. We cannot apply it to special purpose vouchers such as HUD-VASH. Next question, question number 9. Which of the following is needed for HUD, for the Financial Management Center, Gene, to process non-HAP disbursements? Which of the following is needed to process non-HAP disbursements? We talked about this today as well. Estimated total HAP, non-HAP, and administrative expenses not entered in VMS. Confirmation that funds will be fully expended within 3 business days. A detailed description of the purpose of the use of funds, or D, all of the above. Again, the question is, what does Jean and her team know at the Financial Management Center? What do they need in order to process non-HAP disbursements? A estimated total of the funds, confirmation that they'd be spent, or description of the needs. Good job, most of you. 38 of you got it right. The answer is all of the above. Jean gave you a preview of that when she answered one of the questions earlier. And so good job. Just as a reminder, anytime that you want to use your HAP funds that are being held at HUD, if you want to use them for non-traditional, if you want to use them for non-HAP purposes, but still eligible for MTW, this is what you need to provide. The estimated total amount, the confirmation of funds, the confirmation that they'll be spent within 3 days, and a description of the purpose. That's the information that Jean and her team would need in order to be able to disperse those funds. All right, last question. Last question. HAP renewal eligibility for expansion agencies is the lower of MTW HAP renewal eligibility cap or the rebenchmark for that year's actual HAP plus and non-HAP eligible expenses. True or false? This is a true or false question. HAP renewal eligibility for expansion agencies is the lower of the MTW HAP renewal eligibility cap or the rebenchmark year's actual HAP, non-HAP eligible expenses. True or false? All right. Got it. Good job. The answer is true. And so this is what you've heard Praveen talk about this a few times now. So the renewal eligibility, it's based on the lower of either the eligibility cap or the benchmark of the eligible expenses. So whichever one is the lower, that would be the HAP renewal for your next year. And with that, let's go back to the leaderboard, Laura, to see kind of where we are. I love watching it go back and forth. Oh, I see a penguin. Pingu, have you been there the whole time? He's back. Oh, Puggy got it. Go, way to go, Puggy. Congratulations, that is our leader. You have our respect. I don't know what else we have nothing to actually give you, but respect. If we were in a room, I'd be maybe throwing some candy or something out in there. But since we're remote, we just got to say congratulations from all of us. And I hope that you all enjoyed our little quiz, MTW Finance quiz. And we're interested in hearing how you think that went. So with that, I think, Laura, we can go back to the regular slides, or John, or whomever. But that was, and thank you so much for Philip for putting that together. That was a lot of fun. So now we are kind of coming close to, yay, Puggy. So we are coming close to the end here of our time together. I wanted to see at this point, this is really your time. Any questions? You've got me, you've got Philip, you've got Jean, you've got Praveen. We're all here to answer any questions that we can. If we can't, we will find the answer and get back to you. Any questions that you guys have on anything we talked about today, anything else as it relates to MTW expansion, kind of getting onboarded. And I believe you're all still able to talk verbally too. So you can unmute yourself or put in a chat to everybody so that we can all kind of see your question, your chat. Hello, are you guys still there? Well, go Puggy. Well, thanks, Julie. That answers my next question. Laura, next slide. How was that? Was that something worth doing? What'd you think of that? Was that fun? Is that something that we should try to incorporate into future slides? Is it a good way to just test your knowledge on everything that we've been talking about over the last few, I guess, weeks or so? Yeah, okay. So hearing a lot of fun, cool, way to go, Puggy. Awesome, 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 great. So thank you for that feedback. I want to know, does anyone know who Puggy actually is? Puggy, will you reveal yourself? Oh wait, was that you, Puggy? Wait, was that you, Michael Rogers? Is that you? Way to go, Michael Rogers, if that's you. Hilarious. Way to go, Michael. Way to go, HHA. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, we're happy to give the day a highlight. You know, we are right here in the middle of the Wednesday, so happy to have some fun today. Are there any other questions for us before we start to wrap up? All right. Laura, if we can go to the next slide. As always, and you've heard us plugging these resources today, the Mtw ACC amendments is, you all should have it by now. It's available on the website, the selection notice. We've got Cohort 1 and Cohort 2 agencies. You got to make sure that you're familiar with the requirements in there. The operations notice, wasn't that cool today where somebody had a question about DDTF and I was able to go to my linked operations notice and type in DDTF and get an answer? Encourage all of you to do the same. Read it, link it, become familiar with it. And then also check out our Moving to Work page. We will be making some updates there soon and periodically on the regular MTW page, the HUD expansion page. There's a lot of good information on the training. If you go to the HUD exchange, that's where you'll find, this is the second to bottom bullet, oh my goodness, my brain has, the manual, the online manual that ICF puts together, which really breaks down, takes the operations notice and it breaks it down into digestible pieces. One of the newer pieces that we just put up on the online manual was the piece about the impact analysis and hardship policies. There were a lot of questions about that in the beginning. And so from the Cohort 2 agencies, and we have recently put that up, I think we sent an insider out about that. So take a look at that. And then we also have all of these webinars that we're doing are on the HUD Exchange page as well. And so, you know, we can answer any questions there as well. Next question. I'm tired. Next slide, please. All right. Upcoming webinars on the 30th, our friends from the evaluators. This is for Cohort 2 agencies. We will have a webinar specifically for you, for Cohort 2 agencies. The invite did go out already this week. It did not go out from me. It did not go out from ICF. I forget actually who it went out from, but it was a different, it went out directly from the evaluators. So definitely keep an eye out for that email, which will link to that MDRC. Thanks, Eva. So you would have received an email from MDRC inviting you to the webinar on June 30th. That'll tell you everything you need to know about the evaluation. For Cohort 2 agencies, we will delve very deeply into the MTW supplements, the public process, everything you need to know about that on the 14th of July. On July 28th, Wendelin Huvendick, our MIS, will walk you through the online tool of this supplement, and she'll kind of walk you through, kind of show you how it works. So be ready for that. And then we will have another office hours like this on the supplement, and we will be inviting the Cohort 1 agencies back for that one as well. So Cohort 1 agencies, you are going to be welcome back to the office hours again on the supplement on August 4th. And then subsequent to all of that, on a date to be determined, there will be training for you all on the transition to IMS PIC modernization. And so details from that are forthcoming, and we will let you guys know that as soon as those details are available. Next slide, please. Laura, did we just leave? Oh, there. This is, thank you. All right, thank you, guys. There ends our office hours today for the finance training. Again, huge thanks to Philip for all of his effort in pulling this together, and so many thanks to all of you for coming. You had a lot of really, really good questions. Definitely read the ops notice, take a look at the training, and then if you have any further questions, just don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Huge thanks to Jean and Praveen also for joining us and presenting, and our friends at ICF for pulling this together. So with that, thank you guys so much, and enjoy the 15 minutes of your day back. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.